7 for Bravo Fox Papa.
Friends, when I say that you are our heroes, I am not patronizing you. You have made a choice to take your vocational time and get up every day and sow your entire life into service to others. You are not consumed with avarice, consumption, greed. You have experiencing a life that's worth living. You're experiencing a life that's worth living, and you've decided to spend your life to ensure other people experience a life worth living. So when I tell you that you're my heroes, friends, I'm putting together baseball cards that don't have players on them, but have nonprofit C-suite executives on. The celebration, what is the chief end of Western culture? I would argue to take care of our poor, to take care of our infirm, to take care of our mentally ill. That is a sign of a developed society. And you are a jewel in the crown of the community where you have your impact. You sit at the gates of that city as a peer to the politicians, as a peer to the corporate owners, as a peer to the donors that are within your service footprint. So when I say you are our heroes, it comes to the deepest part of my heart. And I would like to introduce you to a group of heroes that I've been able to spend time with the last 3 years who have impacted me personally. And we'll just start with Brooke Foley and the Jayne Agency. We're so glad that you're here, Brooke, and we hope that you can help us reconcile ourselves within our organizations. I give you Brooke Foley.
Hi, nice to meet everybody. We hope you enjoyed today. We're going to be sharing some things, educating some things, pressing on some things, and all along the way, if you have questions, feel free to ask, shout out, challenge us. Don't worry about it. We're used to it. It's what we do. But you are going to be able to engage and participate and see your own answers coming through things. And you're going to be able to put some thought into some things as we go through today. I started Jayne Agency in 2009. And I just wanted to give a second to allow the team members from Jayne that are on the call just to introduce themselves. You're welcome to reach out to them in the chat. Abigail and Veronica are from Jayne, and they've sat through many of these. Veronica is the mastermind between the Mentimeter component of what we brought here today. She's innovation in motion. So just feel free, Veronica, you want to introduce yourself so people feel like they can reach out to you if they need to in chat or throughout the process.
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, I'm Veronica Kern. I'm at, again, Jayne Agency. I'm an account manager.
putting together this Mentimeter has been a lot of fun. So we get to interact, and you'll get to, I don't know, like have a little bit of fun with this today, right? Like that's kind of the point, is to get some education and enjoy what we're doing. So if you have any questions, please reach out, and happy to be here and meet you all.
And then Abigail.
Hi, I'm Abigail. I'm interning with Jayne Agency.
Okay, so let's get started. There is a code at the top. You can see it says www.menti.com, and then there's a code that goes next to it. Just go to that URL.
Use your phone. On your phone, go to menti.com.
Do you want to talk them through that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. If just on your phone, just go to menti.com and then it'll give you a place to enter that code. It's 88691929. And once you're in, it'll take you
1921.
Oh, I'm sorry. 1921 numbers. We're having an issue. Anyways, once you're in there, it'll take you through the presentation with us. So you'll be able to interact as we're asking questions. You'll be able to interact with your phone and see everyone's responses live. So if you have any questions, again, just reach out and chat, and I can talk you through it.
So I went to a browser on my phone. I put in menti.com and Mentimeter came up, and it is, could you read the code out loud for me?
Yes, it is 8869 1921.
Submit. And there it is. It's on my phone. Thank you, Veronica.
You're welcome.
I'm doing it too to make sure I can keep up with us. And I can see some people are already starting to play around with some of the controls. And so there's some things on the bottom. You can give us feedback. It helps us. We love the love. Obviously, we love the likes. If there's a question, Veronica will pull it out. I'm not that great at tracking the questions once we're in the presentation. And if you don't like something, or something hurts, or something's a problem, or you have an issue with something, feel free to do the thumbs down too. It helps all of us to kind of see where the overall culture is going together. So reconciling nonprofit staff and board conflict. So what happened for us, some people might say like, well, what does a branding agency have to do with reconciling board conflicts? So I happen to sit as a board chair on two different 501c3s. One I founded, and one I just sort of have helped move into action. There's a couple board members on this call from that board as well. One's called It's Not Just Dinner, where we help certified WBEs, MBEs, certified small businesses learn to leverage certification. So you get certified and then you don't really know what to do with it. And then the second is Magdalene House Chicago, which is pretty in-depth in terms of daily accountability. We have residential as well as trauma-informed care. We move women out of incarceration into 2 years of cost-free living as they heal from human trafficking. And so we just had our gala last week. We hit our fundraising goals. And so, you know, we live inside of that struggle every single day. So what happened over time for us was that we had a lot of nonprofit clients that were working with us. They would come to us and say, we need to redo a logo. And it was the common ask, but what was really sitting behind that was the need to reconcile the C-suite, the staff, and the board. And what happened was that over time, we started to see this pattern of discontent, and it was almost like, I think it was mentioned earlier, ageism. And when we really dug into what we found was that the C-suite was being held hostage by the idealism of the staff. The board was rejecting what was happening with the staff and holding the C-suite accountable. And the laws have changed around being an executive inside of a C-suite and fundraising, as well as staff management over the course of the last 7 to 8 years. And that was not being transferred or being a shared burden across the staff and the board. When we started bringing them together just in the name of creating a brand strategy in order to solve the logo issue, what we were finding was that there was multi-generational angst. And as we went through and separated them out, we saw that the staff had very, very similar ideals to the board and the C-suite, but they talked about them differently. And once we connected them, it was like creating a family table of, the grandchildren working with the parents, working with the board members. And we started to see some of the C-suite was moving into the board, and some of the board members were actually going out of retirement and coming in as volunteers. And we started to see this dynamic cycle, and we started to see people relating instead of having so much conflict. And so we use those exercises regularly now to create unity across the staff, the C-suite, and the board. And so we're going to share some of the details and the exercises that we've really had a long-term consistent performance with here today. But we brought a little twist to it, which is more of an interactive component through this Mentimeter. So you're going to get to be able to see what you think and what your needs are, and we're going to be able to dig in and address them. And so when Jimmy asked us how long we thought, we said, give it 3 hours, because we might actually be able to help heal and solve some things. And if we get done sooner, then we will. So join us on this journey. So we'll get started. So really quickly, just thought we'd share a bit about us so you understand when we start to reference some things in terms of activities. So Jayne Agency ourselves are all about response. So every time someone hits any of those Mentimeter things, we're like, response. We were founded in 2009. Our mission is actually to make the world more gooder. It used to be larger with different things inside of it. And eventually we kind of did our own research. We took our own medicine and we chopped it down to just make things more gooder. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's lunch, if it's a campaign, if it's a program, if it's a company, if it's an initiative, it's a country. Just help make the world more gooder, one good decision at a time. We have values, which are very different than our brand. Our values are how we get what we need done. They're how we make our mission, our purpose, go into operational action. Accountability, collaboration, creativity, tenacity, and trust. This is how we deliver. And we're going to talk about values and how that hits the different generations as well. Then we have this thing called a position, and the position is smack in the center of our brand. We are known as instigators of brand alignment. We actually annoy, nudge, cajole, push, force, challenge our clients into alignment so that they can then push back on us, call us out in alignment, and start to own their own brands. And it's very powerful and very healthy. And then our promise, which is brand clarity through smartly strategic, wickedly creative, response-driven outcomes. Now we have a very, very organized brand. We sell it for a living, right? However, you'll see throughout today, the course of today, that we live up to our brand and how we help our clients, especially in the 501c3 space, the nonprofit space, because some of our clients are 501c3s, some are 501c6s, some are social justice enterprise, some are justice enterprise. So you'll start to hear a little bit of those examples as well. But team alignment comes from clarity. And that is the big lesson we have learned over time. So we want to start out by asking the first interactive question for today. What are you, the people on this call that we're so gracious and honored to be able to talk to, what are you hoping to do today? Feel free to select any, one, all, or some. So are you looking to use brand to reconcile internal conflict? Are you looking to use brand? Oh, wow, everybody started moving already. Well, giddy up. And we'll just take a second. You can start to see what people are looking to do. We have a lot of people here today that strengthen their brand and diagnose what's not working. This is going to be a good session. A lot of people looking to learn what a brand platform is. You'll get that too. We're going to educate on that. Learning to align your organization through internal brands. That's absolutely going to happen. We'll give a few more seconds for people to settle in on what they've chosen.
Well, I'll be honest with you. This is a relief to me in that I was wondering if somebody's about to be fired because of an errant board member or a staff member going crazy, and how are we going to be able to meet their needs? And it feels like a high percentage of our group is here to understand how to do that through branding. So thank you, Brooke.
Absolutely. So we really have, you can see we have a high concentration inside of strengthening the organization's brand, diagnosing what's not working, learning what a brand platform is, using brand to reconcile, But the others that don't even, that don't have as high of numbers, those are important too. So being able to just create that brand platform itself and using brand to reconcile the external conflict. And typically this is the one that leads to all others as well, because having external conflict has everything to do with who you hire, how you're actually finding your beneficiaries, and how your funding is happening. So let's get started. And thank you everyone for contributing. The more you contribute, the more value everyone's going to get out of today. The first thing we're going to talk about is, what are you trying to accomplish? And then we know that this sounds like we're starting out way out here, and we are. And usually when we help brands find their way, all they're doing throughout the entire process is reconciling things. So when we start out by saying, what is it you're trying to accomplish? Everyone always says fundraising. Well, but there's a lot that goes in there. And so what we want to do is say, start with a financial question. What is it that you are financially trying to accomplish? So we can start to help you right-size expectations for yourself. So what are you trying to accomplish within your organization? It's a financial question. If we use numbers to lead us, what we will do is right-size our expectations. We will right-size the programs that we create. We'll right-size the expectations of our teams. And oftentimes, especially nonprofits, we keep the financials close to the vest. But if you have people who understand what it is they're working for and how they're trying to reconcile those things, they will align and they will work with you. So let's talk about that. Let's see what the next slide has. As we say all the time, numbers rule everything, no matter how idealistic we are. What are your financial goals for the coming year? Don't be shy, sing out loud. You don't have to reveal your company and the numbers. It's anonymous when you go to put your numbers in here. But what we want to do is start helping people identify what's actually a goal versus a tactic. Because oftentimes, especially in nonprofits, we will tie our year's goal to something that's a tactic. And as we go to hit the next year inside the strategic plan, we don't have what we need. So what we'd like to do is start this whole exercise out by level setting what is actually truly a financial goal versus a tactic. So if you don't know what your financial goal is, the easiest way to answer that is, what are your operating costs? And you're going to have something a little bit more than operating costs in order to be able to make it through the year. So what is your monthly net times 12? So someone has 5 million, someone has 14 million. So when I talk about the fact, and we'd love to see everybody else's come in here too, we're seeking endowment funders to reach 1.2 million, raise 10 million, 500,000, 10 million. Okay. And the thing that you need to think about inside of those that have the rich financial goals here, how much of that is already committed versus what is incoming? Because what brands do is they serve your organic relationships, ones that are already in existence, and they also serve filling the gap. And brand helps drive marketing so that you can fill that gap, but also retain those who have been loyal to you. So you can see that there's some decent amounts of different types of goals in here. So grow is an objective. I just saw grow in here. Increase inflows to 1.5 million, 400,000 incoming. So what I'm going to do, can I click on, Veronica, will you, thank you. 3 million operation and, oh, can you grab that one again? 3 million operation and raise 2 million in major gift initiatives to fund new programs. So let's break this one down for a second. 3 million in operations. That means we know that we're collecting 3 million in operating capital. And we also want to raise 2 million in major gifts initiatives to fund new programs. There's a series of financial goal, operational costs, objectives, and strategies inside this. So when we break it down, what really the goal looks like here to me is raise 2 million while sustaining 3 million already. So whoever put that one in there, I hope that that's helping. The major gifts initiative is a strategy. Raising X amount is an objective. And so we'll start to break those down more. Let's look at one more that we could break apart. 400,000 incoming, hope to secure endowment funding. So I'm going to say something right now. I'm never popular when I say this, but we love each other after. Hope is not a strategy. It actually puts us in a place where we're very, very much at risk. So what we want to do is create objectives. Secure endowment funding is an objective. And then the strategies to ensure that we do that is going to be 2 exercises from now. So we're going to talk about objectives and we're going to talk about strategies. But for right now, 400,000 is our goal. Hope is a barrier. We're going to go through that exercise too. Secure endowment funding is an objective. And the detail on how we make sure that happens, we remove hope as a risk, is our tactics.
In our chat in Zoom, there is a question, Brooke, and I think it's okay for me to ask. Somebody asked, what does the word brand mean to Jayne Agency? What is a brand?
I love that question. A brand is the fundamental assets required to keep your organization stable as it relates to your people, your finances, your culture, your market share. Brand sits inside of 10 specific assets: your goals, your barriers, your strategy, your objectives, your audience. We're going to go through all of these today. The insight that helps you cultivate that audience, the position and promise, as well as your support, your tone, and personality. And we're going to touch on all of those today. I just want to confirm that whoever asked that I answered your question directly.
What if I said that quite often, when we think in terms of brand, we think in terms of Coca-Cola's logo. And what I just heard you explain was all the dimensions of organizational development. And I wouldn't mind, if we're going to hit it on a list again later, that would be great. But how would you start with 3 sentences and explain what a brand is in the Jayne Agency economy?
I will repeat myself, and it might not be the popular answer because people want the answer to be your logo, your name, and your tagline. And those happen to be 3 things that sit inside of tone and personality. They are assets. They're tangible assets, but they aren't the brand strategy. And without the brand strategy, the ability to regulate and manage logo, tagline, name, etc., becomes very, very detrimental and risk-oriented. So a brand strategy helps rule and regulate. The assets themselves become tangible things that people believe in when the brand strategy is performing operationally from the organization standpoint. Does that help?
It sure does. That's great.
Okay. Yeah. And oftentimes people will say, well, isn't that just identity? The logo, your name, your tagline, those are identity. Identity is an asset inside of the brand strategy. But that isn't how it's treated in the marketing industry, because most people don't want to dig in and take accountability for the 10 assets I just described. The reason we call them assets is that when you take 6 to 8 people in your company and you invest $20,000, $30,000 in defining these 10 assets, and you've educated them, and you create alignment across multiple constituencies, sometimes 2, 3, 4, 500 people, sometimes 2 million. We've worked with 15 million. You've invested in something that becomes regulatory within your organization. It's provable in a court of law. It's tangible, both internally and externally. It helps govern. It becomes a compliance. It's much larger than just an identity. The identity is the visual expression of that governance. Does that help?
That's really great.
Yeah, it's sort of a lost practice in business these days. Okay, so hopefully that breakdown that I did of that 3 million to create and secure helped everybody see that inside, oftentimes when we say our goal is, that we're packing a bunch of things in there that become insurmountable for teams to deliver and execute on. And so by breaking it down and being really specific, this year, we all as a group have to bring in 400 million. You're able to create alignment about the fact that, hey, if we bring in 400 million, we're all still here. And if we don't, we're not. I think the number was 400,000, but will forgive me. Any other questions? Somebody, I saw something coming through in the chat. Brand strategy is the sum of those 10 assets. Just to help clarify. All right, should we move on? So barriers. When we first start working with people, especially in the nonprofit sector, they don't want the barrier discussion to happen group-wide. And we always talk about the fact that it's actually one of the most healthy and organizing, galvanizing aspects of the process. So we ask the question, what can stop this brand from succeeding? Think about what's in the way and then dig deeper and get real. So when we talk about barriers, we'll discuss them on a topical level. We'll be political about how we talk about them. And those two things right there are barriers. And what happens is it becomes systemic breakdown within the organization. And then you lead to things like this place, these people, those guys, and you create separatism. When we talk openly about the barriers and we acknowledge them, when we go, yeah, that is a problem. And the bigger problem is it's not getting solved right now. It's going to be solved in 2024. Well, even though it's disappointing to hear it's not getting solved in 2024, what's important is it got validated and we're now aligned that it is a barrier. And now we know, okay, in 2024, that's going to get solved. But in the meantime, here's stopgap measures. And so what happens is barriers start to become an unbelievably important part of strategic planning. So when we think about what's in the way, and then we talk about it, and then we really reveal it, is when we start getting into a space where we can take our most damning barriers and we can turn them into our most powerful strategies, which means we are strengthening from the inside out. So let's talk about barriers real quick. Actually, we never talk about barriers quickly. Okay, so throw out as many as you can in a 2-minute period. We're going to give you 2 minutes to go through this one, because what happens is you're tentative at first, and then you start really, and then you're like, you know what, as long as I'm putting it out there. So we want you to get it out there, give yourself time. And you know what, you can keep putting them in through the entire presentation, but get those out there, and then we'll start picking a couple to talk about so that we can break them apart. And what's going to happen is after we've gone through all 10 assets, we're going to allow the group to pick 2 assets that we want to really dig deep hard into. So what barriers? Let's throw out as many as you can in a 2-minute period. Ready? Go. And you could start seeing that there's all sorts of different organizing principles happening on the screen. Wow. Time and accountability just stay center, if you've noticed, as everybody's submitting theirs. So we did this exercise in a room of 100 CEOs. And supply chain just sat straight in the center the entire time, kind of similar to the way time and accountability are here. So it looks like it's settling down. Some people are still submitting, I can tell. So let's start talking about some of these. Clearly time. And oftentimes people will say, well, how does brand have anything to do with time? Well, when things are clear within a brand, it means that people's job descriptions are all aligned against that financial goal we just talked about. And the things that people need to get done in a day, they either start voicing, hey, I don't have the training for this. I don't have the skill set for this. It becomes clear they don't have the character for it. You're able to start addressing what's happening even at the job description level to reconcile what should or shouldn't be happening. When people start doing things on the board and becoming resentful or taking on the staff member's role or suffocating a staff member, or a staff member is doing something or not doing what needs to get done, when the brand's overall goal is clearly set out, it's very easy to start pushing and guiding that to a better place. When we talk about budget, really when we have budget concerns and issues, that's because we're not getting the fundraising or the types of development dollars that we need. So how do we use brand to then drive everything from healthy top of funnel into conversion in our activity, our development activities? We start to think about things like the marketing plan, who can or can't participate in this. If you're a one-man show, like, does that look like a Post-it note that sits right up on your computer with the top 3 things you need to do? Do we start talking about rocks, pebbles, and sand? It depends on what's happening inside the organization, but I would say that across the board, we have a range of individuals that represent a range of sizes of organizations with a range of complexity. And if you look and you see budget, time, accountability, and communication are sitting at the top. So let's just talk quickly about some strategies around that. So from an accountability standpoint, again, we go back and we talk about job description, and it rides right into time. When we're able to sit down and say, this is the organization's goal, and this is how your role fits into the organization's goal. What do you need to be successful? Well, the reason that this goal is like it is here is because this is what needs to get done. And the strategies, which we'll talk about in a second, that need to move us towards that goal, here's how you fit inside of those. When we talk about communication, everything from the internal team meetings to the board meetings that we hold, if they're following suit inside of the brand strategy, all they're doing is helping uplift. There's a few board members on this call right now that sit on a board with me. And when we were straying from our mission and we were straying from our brand, our board meetings were really painful. I mean, we just could not settle in and get through things. We couldn't get things accomplished. We took so much time to get through an agenda that was so unorganized based on what our goals were. But then when we stepped back and said, look, this is our brand promise, and this is what we need to do. And in order to meet our brand promise, this is what our financial goal needs to be. And we organized everything around that. We're now like clockwork moving through those board meetings, right? So budget, time, accountability, lack of clarity. So when we don't have clarity, this process really does start to force it. Even just sitting down and saying with your team members, or finding a quiet moment with yourself, light a candle, put out a glass of wine, have a moment to have yourself quiet within your own thoughts and write out what's not clear. It seems so simple for me to say that, but sometimes what seems not clear is tied to something else that's not clear, is tied to something else that we really just don't want to admit, deal with, or take care of. And so all of a sudden you're saying, well, I thought this was a conversation about brand. It is. When what you believe is not reconciled with what you do, you have a brand conflict and it bleeds all through the organization. When you organize those things, you're empowering everyone to be moving together. So understanding what's sitting behind the barrier of accountability, behind the lack of clarity, behind the budget concerns, starts to break out the strategies that need to happen to overcome them. And now it's not the big scary monster in our face all the time. It becomes things that we can tackle. And when we tie them back in with position, promise, we start to define the ways in which we will or will not solve those things. And oftentimes that starts to feel really empowering. So I'm looking forward to getting to those exercises as well. There's a couple others in here that are really detrimental, especially inside of 501c3, but politics. So creating alignment within brands and going through this exercise, if you have board members that are really, I saw something in here, board members that are ignorant, if ignorant board members start to feel political very fast because they're operating based on what they know and they believe, whether it's relevant or not to the organization that you're delivering on. And the organization you're delivering on is directly tied to your promise. And the promise, this is a sneaky one, your promise as a barrier is what you operationally deliver every day, day in, day out to your beneficiaries. But your mission, your purpose may sit in a more idealistic space. Mission is purpose, promise is how you operationalize. And we'll go through both. We're going to go through promise. Wow, lack of clarity is starting to really rise to the top here.
What barriers or what role do barriers play in conflict between the 4 generations?
So I'll give you an example. We were working with an organization that was dedicated to dental health. And the staff, which was almost everyone on that staff was, 30 something and below in terms of age. They moved like this. They were always on social and they were communicating with each other and they were doing the things that they needed to do. And the board chair and CEO of the 501c3 was not. She wasn't online. She didn't have apps hooked up. She wasn't on side of the social threads. She didn't see where the staff was celebrating wins or where the development team was communicating things back out. She wasn't seeing that dynamic digital culture. And what was happening is that everyone would get in a room and then there was just resentment. Because her belief was that the team that was delivering operationally was not in alignment with what she saw the mission being. And the rest of the C-suite was doing everything they could to try and create liaison communication. Some were digital, some were not. But the board itself had moved into a space where they were starting to really get on Facebook. And once they started getting on Facebook, they started seeing some of the fringe dynamics that were happening with the staff, and they started to have a discontent. They weren't trusting the CEO and they weren't trusting the staff because they weren't sure. And what we ended up doing was connecting the board and the staff together over what was happening in social. And all of a sudden we started to see what was happening. When we took them through the barriers exercise, digital culture came out as one of the most important things to the staff. Digital culture meant a lack of communication and a lack of access to the C-suite. And to the board, it started becoming something like, well, hey, wait a minute, maybe we understand this. But the brand itself was requiring digital culture because the beneficiaries were reached through social media. So all of a sudden, what was a communication and a alignment issue over mission became soothed by people being able to connect through digital culture. And what we ended up seeing was that the staff started helping the C-suite get online. We started to see them get comfortable with the social media. We started seeing more of them get support and confidence shared by the board. So now the board was supporting the staff members because they started to relate to them more like, oh, okay, so that's kind of like when my grandchild helps me get online. Because my grandchild is now my IT tech support all the time. I call them at college all the time. My 12-year-old has helped me get online. Like they started to break down the barrier of complexity. So everything from digital culture to alignment, mission and purpose all started to come into play. Does that help?
Thank you.
It was very powerful. Okay, so I think lack of clarity, time, accountability, communication, awareness, these become barriers, and we'll see how we can feed those through some of the other things that we talk about and where they show up. By the way, let's go to the next slide. Let's take a second to just say, is this helpful? If it is, hit the thumbs up. If it's hitting on current issues right now, hit the heart. We're hitting on current issues right now. This is good. Okay.
What if I just said that I don't understand the first one, specific?
No monkey business. Okay, let's talk about objectives first, and I'll hit hard on specific. What are we looking to accomplish? So the goal, and I'm going to pull on this one of raising 400,000. The goal is a financial element. It's a commitment. It's an alignment that we're going to have. Barriers get in our way of achieving that 400,000 commitment. An objective is what we're going to commit to from an initiative level to track, manage, and measure whether or not we are meeting our goals and overcoming our barriers. Now, objectives are not strategies. They are not our tactics. They sound like things like raise awareness, educate population X, build a new brand. They are major commitments that we're making in broad strokes that we can measure. Build a new brand, it's binary, on, off, we did or didn't do it. Raise awareness, we can use pre and post aided and unaided surveys to determine whether or not we've done that. So I gave a couple different examples there.
Veronica, maybe we've had so many people come in since we started. Maybe you could one time review menti.com and the code.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you missed the intro where we were talking about how to engage with the presentation with us, if you want to on your phone, just type in menti.com in the browser. You can enter this code 88691921 and it'll take you to our presentation and you can engage and with the reactions like Brooke was just talking about and the questions as we go through. If you have any questions, reach out to me in chat.
So our objectives are how we're going to measure our success along the way. And we talk in terms of SMART objectives. People oftentimes talk in terms of SMART goals. We talk in terms of SMART objectives. They need to be specific. So oftentimes people will create objectives that are vague. We within Jayne have a mantra, and you'll kind of giggle to yourself when you hear this, but no more vagaries. If there's a wiggle room in it, tease it out, toss it out. Figure it out, get it specific, lock it in. When there's vagary inside of our objectives, that's when people, well, was that my responsibility or yours? Are we really committed to that or not? Every ounce of vagary that we introduce creates disconnect for people. And we want to just remove that out. Clarity becomes decomposed when there's vagary. So specific, really tightly stated, no monkey business. If you could say, is it this or that? It's still not specific. We want it to be measurable. If you can't measure it, it's not an objective. So we have people say things like, I want to increase market share. That's measurable. You did or didn't increase your market share. You can see by the share of market that you have, you can measure that. Now, when we say market share, what would that translate to from a nonprofit standpoint? Well, we look at it as in the world of donors, in the space of the category or the service that we're providing, are we gaining the momentum that we want with the type of donors that we want, right? But we want to measure it. Is it achievable? Can you lay out a path? Can you say from point A to point B, and then from point B to point C, we're going to be able to achieve what we said. So if we have to measure it, can we achieve it? It has to be realistic. Do you have the capacity? Do you have the skill, the talent? Do you have the time? Do you have the resources to make it happen? This is the hope killer, right? This is the one that stamps out hope and turns it into, is it or isn't it going to be actionable? And then it has to be time bound. When we have objectives that are not time bound, what happens? They languish. Not being time bound is a very, very caustic vagary. So when it's time bound, we're marching against it. We have to back it out and say, all right, if it's realistic, these are the things that I'm going to do. This is the achievability of it based on the timeline I have. It's the basis of strategic planning. Somebody's asking to see the slides as well. I don't know what that means, but let's help them.
I
No,
think
no,
they're-
that's not the issue. They're just wondering if the presentation is going to be available at the end. And I've put this in the chat. I got the answer.
Yes. Okay. And so time bound is really critical because if we let that go, we are creating a complete disconnect with everyone that we brought along the way. So brands live inside of cycles, and the cycles are critical. And we don't talk about this when we talk about a logo or we talk about a name, but brands live inside of cycles. They live inside of timelines and seasons that have every effect on when and how people are going to respond to us. So if our brand isn't ready to show up for the gala, what happens? Our donors see disarray, right? So time bound is critical. So again, hoping that was helpful. Let's move on to the next one. Playing with objectives. Name your top 3. So remember, objectives, they have to be smart. And oftentimes they get lost inside of tactics, angst and urgency and anxiety. They get hidden inside of things that we hope for. So throw out some objectives. We'll start breaking them out and we can talk about which ones work and don't. So ready? Go. I'm going to enter some too. So I'm going to jump into this right now. Increase major donors by 10% in 2023. Excellent, perfect objective. You get a star. Remove toxic leadership. So that would be a strategy. That is going to actually move into our strategy space. Toxic leadership itself should probably sit inside of a barrier. Compassion isn't an objective. It is a value that sits inside your organization. So, and I'm going to give you an example of how we reconcile disconnect inside of different organizations or inside of different organizations. When we talk about things like removing toxic leadership as an objective, we are not helping the brand serve its financial goal. We're addressing an operational HR related concern in the space of brand. And so what we're doing is we're reducing our focus when we're talking brand, and we're not addressing things inside of the context of HR. So removing toxic leadership is actually critical. We absolutely want to do that. Now, where brand can help is that when you develop your brand the right way, and we create a strategy called retention, we write that and it sounds something like reduce unwanted turnover, meaning we want to keep the people we want. Increase wanted turnover is a brand's objective. Now we're helping that toxic leadership find their way out at no cost to us other than what we have to introduce into our brand, which helps us meet our business goals anyway. So I know that was like a tricky, like flip it on its side and turn it around, but we see 100% of the time that the removal of the reduction of unwanted turnover, keep the people that we want and that are right for us, increase wanted turnover is always inside of our internal brand strategies.
If I could just say, Brooke, I see this happen hundreds of times where an organization will go through what I think you're calling brand development, I would call organizational development, and there's unity as to what the objectives are supposed to be. But that also means some people said, I didn't join this organization as an employee to do that. I didn't serve on this board to see that. And that can be an exit strategy. Okay?
Absolutely. And it's healthy. It's healthy to say, look, I'm not in alignment with the brand. It is so much more healthy. It's an easier way for everyone to move into the higher potential that they need. So acquire at least 3 properties necessary to build trail connections. So acquire 3 properties necessary to build trail connections. Acquiring the 3 properties is a strategy. I'm not positive what the objective is, but I think the objective is increase capacity. If we're talking about properties, I'm kind of going out on a limb there. I don't know if that person can come off mute, or if they don't want to, you don't have to. But my guess is that acquiring the properties is tied to capacity building. And that is the objective is increase capacity. The strategy is acquire at least 3 properties. Provide awesome service to our members. That developed further would end up actually being sitting inside of your promise. Your objective is really, and this is where people get really anxious with us, is really going to be tied to your funding sources, your primary funding sources. And if your members are paying members, they're going to sit inside of that funding source. But providing the awesome service is actually your promise. What you might want to do is make your objective attract the most high performing members. Your strategy would be to promote the service and the testimonials of those in which you serve already. And what happens is when the board, the staff, and the C-suite understand that the means in order to provide that awesome service is your promise, the people you recruit, both from a board member, from an employee, and from a paying member standpoint, start to align. And what you promise becomes what people believe they're getting, and your brand just elevates.
Brooks, Sarah actually responded in chat.
Okay.
Says the objective is to expand the mileage of the Parkway Trail system. Acquiring the properties will increase the connectivity of land where the new miles of trail can be constructed.
Hold on, let me look at that in chat. The objective is to expand the mileage.
It's program expansion.
Yeah, it's program expansion. The objective is so you're increasing your capacity to serve. So that makes sense. Okay. Let's carve out time for networking. Update business plan, hire an operations manager. So carving out time for networking, time is the barrier. The strategy would be to carve out time for networking. And the objective would be to increase, fundraising, development time, donation, however you're going to categorize it. And the strategy is through networking. See how that breaks down? I hope that's helpful. Updating the business plan is a tactic. Hiring an operations manager is also a tactic. The objective might be to increase the staff by X%, or secure X roles, But the hiring of it, the discussion of hiring it is someone's tactical job. If it sits inside your objectives, and if it's your particular objective, then your financial objective isn't going to get met. And the brand will serve over and over and over to help you meet that objective, as long as your time isn't being relegated or managed in a way that is serving you, not the operation, or you, not the brand.
Brooke,
I hope that's helpful.
that's not me barking, by the way. Brooke, I just have to ask myself a transparent question. What, you have these 10 assets and you have objectives and promises and you have tactics. Isn't this just organizational development?
Some of it is, but a brand is tied to your organization. It is protecting your employees, your internal culture, your market share, your financials, your risk mitigation. It is the definition of what you do and don't do as an organization in alignment. So yes, it is operationally oriented. We say all the time, especially when we go into for-profit organizations, marketing is not a junior person's job off in the corner. Marketing is every day, all day long, the activities that ensure your brand, and your brand is the regulation of those activities. And that's everybody's job. But when your objectives are skewed and you have team members out in the field delivering against hiring a person versus securing a donor, right? The ability to operate becomes impossible. And so what the brand does is it helps regulate people's priorities. It helps regulate people's passions. It puts it in order so that we could talk about it and have a common lexicon, so that we can agree, so we can hold each other accountable. And we live the brand. When you hear people say, I ride for the brand, right? That's what it is. But it's protecting the financial integrity of the organization at all times. Let me step back for a second. I think it's a great question that you asked, and everyone's awesome to be able to ask any of these questions. And we know we're dispelling myths. We understand that. And sometimes it takes us a couple of days for something to sink in, or you'll be in a conversation where you don't agree with something we've said, and all of a sudden you're seeing it in action and you say, oh, whoa, that's what that meant. That's what this is for, okay? But if you step back and you think about, what does branding mean? If you take it all the way back to what currently still today sits in the NAICS code that people who have businesses have to provide when they enter their taxes, the legitimacy of how we move money around the country and pay each other and hold each other accountable, brand still sits as the branding of livestock. Think about that for a second. It's taking a hot poker, you put it in the fire, whether you think it's humane or not, and it goes on an animal and it says, this belongs to this cattle rancher, this livestock owner. This asset, literally, is mine. It's protecting the financial asset. And we don't think about that every day. We don't think about the fact that the brand that is now on that cattle is the fundamental protection of the asset, which is the basis of the operation of that ranch. Right?
Wow.
Everyone who's employed on that ranch understands their role and responsibility to ensure the well-being of that asset.
It's great stuff. It's
right.
I don't even know what to say. I'll stop. Keep going.
So there's a difference between, and I just saw a comment in the chat, and I'm so grateful for this. Brand strategy is what we're talking about. Brand identity sits inside of logo, tagline, visual assets, things like that. That's the brand identity. It's a tone and personality of the brand. Right? But a brand strategy is operational, very, very much so. And what we as small business owners and executive directors inside of 501c3s, what we're conditioned to think about when we think about brand is that logo. And we're conditioned to think, well, the logo, I either have to protect it and make sure it's shown all the time like this. And so I'm being a good brand steward, or I have to go invest money in someone that I barely trust, who barely knows me, to come up with a bunch of visuals that I may or may not relate to. And so we take the notion of brand and we put it over here because it's really hard to solve that. And it's really painful to go through it. But what happens is when we start to get educated on brand strategy, we have a series of levers that help us run our organization, that help us ask questions we couldn't ask before, to challenge people, to hold people accountable, to take things that are wasting our time and move them off our plate and out of our organization. And we become empowered. So brand strategy is very, very underrated. It's very underplayed. It's rarely taught inside of organizations, inside of schools. We've been through a whole series of different educational experiences, and oftentimes it's just not there. We developed this methodology from years of helping people figure out how to best protect their resources. And most often inside of the small business and the 501c3 or nonprofit space, the most valuable asset isn't money, it's time and alignment. So when you talk about those things, that's not sitting in a logo. It's sitting inside of what we are aligned about doing every single day, day in, day out. It's how we choose to ride for the brand. So I hope that's helpful.
It sure is a huge shift, an earthquake-esque volcanic shift of the real application of the term branding.
Yes. And when you take a nonprofit or even a corporate board strategic plan, and then you look at the brand strategy, those two have to reinforce each other. There is no strategic plan that's getting delivered that isn't in alignment with the brand strategy, and there's no brand strategy that's going to succeed inside of a strategic plan that is not aligned. And so oftentimes when people think about brand strategy, they're inserting or applying things based on what we've been taught through the media, through courses, through, and I'm sorry to say this, but marketing agencies that kind of like barnacle on things to us or to our companies that we start to uphold and we start to invest inside of, that may or may not be in our organization's best interest in terms of financial goal, the barriers we really have to overcome, the audiences we really serve. And so that's going to be an interesting conversation too when we get to audience.
Brooke, just 10 seconds on this, because people came here to a certain degree to understand how to reduce internal conflict. So just hit it again. How does this do that?
Well, when you're aligned about objectives, right? When you have a common lexicon, when somebody who's 24 can relate to the same thing that somebody who's been on the board for 10 years, and they could have alignment in the executive director goes from a staff meeting and reports into the board, and the board goes, yep, that's what we expected. You guys are meeting your objectives. This is good. Or this budget doesn't make sense, but you're meeting your objectives. We need to find some different strategies though, that we can afford. Now we're not lashing at the executive director. Now we have a board that is in alignment and in support of the executive director, and the executive director now has language that they can go back to the staff, motivate and increase productivity and engagement on, even if it's not the answer that they wanted, because it's common conversation. It's alignment.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help?
It does. It does. I think we just got to keep bringing it back to reconciling conflict every 15 or 20 minutes, the role all of this plays in doing that. Great job.
Yeah. So there's one in here that I love. I want Veronica, if you could touch on amplify the brand, increase annual operating revenue, secure financial sustainability. Awesome. That one's phenomenal, whoever wrote that. But those are 3 fantastic objectives. Amplify the brand. It's an objective. You can measure it ahead of time. You can say, okay, this is how aware people are of our brand. These are all the places we are or are not being seen right now. And these are all the ways in which our brand is activated throughout our organization, our membership, our beneficiaries, and our donors. And then you can measure it at the end of the year and say that did or did not increase. Phenomenal. Increase annual operating revenue. Absolutely. You can even break that one down and say, we've increased it through monthly donors. We've increased it through grants. You could break it down how that's going to happen. Secure financial sustainability. You can literally look at your P&L at the end of the year and you can say, we did or did not have what we needed on a month by month, on a quarter, however you want to measure it basis, to say that this was sustainable. Now, what I would say is that all 3 of those are in service of the brand, and the brand is in service of all 3. That is a great set of objectives, whoever that is. Well, John, you now became the favorite in the class. Okay, let's keep going. So strategies, I've talked a lot about those because they start to come in all the way at the point of goals, and they always do in every conversation that we have with people. But here's where people start to actually sit forward, and you start to see people moving in a little bit. You start to see some of the skepticism is still here inside of all of us. Jimmy's still going to be peppering at me and coming at me with questions. But the strategies are how we're turning our barriers into strengths. And when we take time to acknowledge and align on what our barriers are, and then we look at our objectives and say, these are the things that we have to do this year in order to meet our goals. Now you're able to say, okay, which of these barriers do we actually have to invest time, money, communication, accountability in to be able to meet those objectives? What are the strategies that are going to secure that we overcome those barriers? So a lack of awareness, right? Well, if we said, look, we have a lack of awareness, but we have a very, very small marketing budget this year. Maybe the issue is that every single person on our team needs training in earned media, that's social media, email, right? And we can turn our entire staff, and maybe it's 7 people, maybe it's 27 people, into a digital marketing department. And instead of us investing, $200,000 for the year that we don't have, or 2 million that we don't have, what if we invest in 5,000 to train our staff and we just amplified everyone, right? Strategies help us get out of the overwhelming of the barriers and start really locking things down. So what are we prioritizing as initiatives that we will invest in? We invest in things like people, resources, equipment, land, properties, right? We're investing in things strategically to be able to make sure that we can meet our objectives. So let's talk about that for a second. And this is just a visual. We are going to ask you to grab a barrier, flip it on into a strategy. Turning weaknesses into superpowers isn't rocket surgery. It just takes breaking it down. And sometimes just this one exercise helps, specifically in our nonprofit space, helps everybody align because it becomes rallying cries for people. So take a barrier and flip it into a strategy. And the real value of this is just starting to see what that feels like.
You shared this with me yesterday, that the identifying authentic barriers ends up being turned into strategies, right? Is that,
Yes.
Want to give us an example?
I want to see people do it first.
Good.
Take a barrier and turn it, take a moment to change your perspective on it, create an empowerment in it, and throw it in here. Because what happens is that becomes the basis of your brand platform. And at the end of this session, what we will have built out is a solid brand platform. Now, we're not doing that today. We're educating on the 10 assets inside of a brand platform. But when we go through and take people through this exercise, and when you get this deck, you're able to, you have the exercises in here, you're able to ask yourself and your staff the questions, you can create your brand platform. And it might have weaknesses inside of it. It might have areas that you need to do some research. You may need to put some funding into creating it. And that's the point in which we get involved. But we're giving you hacks, and we're taking you through the exercise of creating these things yourself so you can DIY as much of it as you can. So let's start seeing those come through from the Mentimeter.
I think that you did help me cheat earlier when you mentioned somebody said something about removing toxic leadership, and you turned it into retention as a
Yes.
strategy somehow.
Yes. Retention. Toxic leadership out. Staff advocating via social media, sharing organizational wins. Very inconsistent. So that sounds like a barrier. Let's flip that one into a strategy. If the staff advocating via social is very inconsistent, then maybe what we do is we identify one or two people that have a strength in it, and we give them a little bit of training, and we allow them to become the dedicated individuals. If that's not going to work, then maybe what we have to do is step back and say, look, that's an area we're going to have to invest in. I think we're going to need to hire an outside organization to help us moderate and deliver on that on a consistent basis. But there's in every strategy, there is a no cost, a low cost, and a some cost answer. And what happens is we as executive directors and board chairs and board members and staff become so overwhelmed in this insurmountable sort of entanglement of what is a goal, what is an objective, what is the barrier, and what is the strategy, and how do we pull those apart and then prioritize them, that sometimes we just do nothing. And that is also a strategy, and it is a damning one. So let's talk about lack of focus on expanding donor base. So let's turn that into a strategy. Let's say that by the end of the year, we want to have such a strength in expanding our donor base that we have momentum. And this one might take 2 years to build out, but let's start by saying who's on the team. Let's use the notion of retention as a strategy to say the people who are really, really aligned with our brand and our position and promise, which we'll talk about developing out today, the people who are really aligned with our brand are the people who are most focused, and that's going to always rise to the top. So let's engage in a driving or increasing the unwanted or decreasing unwanted turnover and increasing wanted turnover strategy on this one. So we want to retain, close in, hug those who are focused on expanding our donor base, who are most aligned with our brand, who exhibit and live our position and our promise once we've defined it. We want to invite out those who don't. By the mere nature of evoking that strategy, you're going to create an intense focus. And once we've got those individuals really highlighted in that focus, it's kinetic. It's going to lead to the others. And that's internal culture, internal brand. It launches from the same brand platform. They're both the same. Okay, communication issues, creating comfortable, low pressure interactions and clear guideline expectations for touching base. So this is an internal comms issue, right? This is really more focused on what's happening within our employee base. And so this sits inside of employee culture, but it really is an HR objective that's feeding into an HR oriented strategy. So if we say the internal communications is a barrier, creating comfortable low pressure interactions and clear guidelines, expectations for touching base. Let's break those two apart and say, creating comfortable low pressure interactions. So we had a client, this is a for-profit client, but the example works really well for nonprofit. We have a for-profit client that had very poor communication issues going across multiple continents and over 200 employees. And even the 10 people that needed to be interacting at the senior level every day didn't have good, comfortable communications. So what we did was, instead of having a granular attack on the problem, we created an internal corporate comms, and nonprofits need this as much as for-profit. We created 4 quarterly meetings where everyone who touches the brand came together. And inside those 4 quarterly meetings, we started to create a consistent agenda for what we called town halls. And we started communicating within the brand. So we used the tone and personality of the brand to reinforce on a regular basis the position and promise. But we use this corporate comms structure of 4 quarterly town halls and 4 quarterly newsletters to start delivering consistent communication that allowed all of the individual departments to start having more granular conversations within a common, and you're going to hear this again, lexicon, because brands are all about driving consistency. When people say, do you have a brand promise? If there isn't something that you deliver every day, day in and day out, that you know you can promise, then your brand has an anemic asset, right? But having these communication issues, and Jimmy, going back to you from the operational development standpoint, internal corporate comms is a primary function of brand, internal brand. It touches HR and it also touches operational development. Absolutely. But when we talk logo and tagline, we don't ever see how brand runs through the entire integrity of the organization from a communication standpoint. And when we don't have those things, we don't have alignment. When we don't have alignment, we have disconnect. We don't have a way to reconcile things. So that's a great way to just start looking at that. And let's talk about how much has to be invested in a quarterly newsletter and a quarterly town hall. Well, probably some time. Those are things at a no-cost basis. We can send out a Zoom invite and get everyone in our organization onto a Zoom and say, today, these are the 4 things that we need to update everybody on and make sure everybody's in alignment on. And we can do that 4 times a year at 0 cost, other than the hours it takes to put someone online. From a some cost standpoint, we could send out, and I'm just going to show you how this amplifies. For some cost, let's say that our position and promise is tied to the notion of helping stabilize the world around children. We can take a $10 gift card, send it to every one of our employees. That's an Amazon gift card at the time of the holidays, and say, look, use this towards, your kids' holiday gifts, right? But then come sit on our town hall. That's a kindness. It's within the brand position and promise. I'm making it up. It's kind of clumsy, but that's within the position and promise, right? And it's a some cost. It's a low cost. At a some cost, it might be that you need to hire someone on the outside to come in and help you set the agenda up, rehearse the people that need to be part of that town hall, rehearse and get everybody prepared to be able to have the media training that they need to represent the brand the way that you want, so that the board members, the staff, the organization is all behaving the way that they should. Now, some people might argue that that should be a quarterly board meeting where the staff is in attendance. Yes, but if people aren't prepared to provide, receive, and engage in information properly within the standards of the brand that helps rule the internal culture, that's when you get those 4-hour board meetings, right? That's when you have the agenda that goes awry. That's when the answers don't happen the way that they should. The board has unrest, the C-suite is being held accountable, and the staff is disengaged, demotivated, demoralized, right? So we're flipping those barriers here. Should we go through one more? I'm going to look to you, Jimmy, to see if if you want me to pick one more out, or if you want to provide one.
I think I really liked, hold on, collaborations have to go beyond. I'm waiting for that. Oh yeah, go ahead.
So taking the barrier of, so I'm going to read this one. Collaborations have to go beyond the conversations. Smaller organizations and individual contributors are critical partners to the success, sustainability, and resilience of our outcomes and communities.
There's a lot there, but I think there's something
Yeah.
correct there.
There's actually 3 in here. So collaborations have to go beyond conversations. So to me, what this sounds like is that there's a barrier or a frustration that people talk about things, but they don't do them. They don't take action. They don't take accountability. To me, this is a combination of where accountability and collaboration intersects. So the barrier might be that we waste a lot of time talking about things. And a second barrier inside of that might be, because I think that this is sort of like hidden in there, that we work in silos or we aren't engaging each other or keeping each other aware, right? That is discontent all day long. So if we were to flip that and turn it into collaboration with that brings people together. So the strategy would be to bring people together to collaborate more often, with accountability tied to every time we converse. So if we are a brand that is about engagement, let's say our position somehow, or our promise somehow is about engaging people, then every time we engage, there should be action. Now we just took a very, what sounds like frustration with almost, sometimes we would call this laziness, or we'd be frustrated with board members or staff members, or even executive directors that don't take action. Now we're creating a brand that's completely activated. Right?
I just want to acknowledge, I want to acknowledge this elephant that may be in the room. Equity and that's the other side. Protect your organization from diversity, equity, and inclusion. But there's an exact opposite one, if we can find it, which says, let's see. Yeah, equity is not a course. So it looks like there's one person here who's an advocate for DEI, and there's another person here that doesn't think that that's positive. This may be a common issue. I don't know. Or is it such a nuclear bomb that it would be distracting?
So I'm gonna touch on it, and then we're gonna keep going, because Veronica's really kind of nudging me that we're gonna run out of time fast. And I just want to make sure that I can at least explain all the exercises and let people get through them.
Sure, sure.
So we specialize in the space of DEI very often, and it is not what people propose it to be. And I agree very much that it is not a course or training, but a culturally relevant practice. It is also a mind state. And we listen to an extraordinary amount of organizations bring people of the very cohorts that they're looking to try and protect. And those cohorts come into the conversation, and they have very, very painful views that actually stop the strategies and the objectives of the very things that they're hired to do. I'll give you an example. We were working with a Fortune 500, actually it's a Fortune 100. They had a organizational development objective, which was DEI oriented and supplier diversity oriented. And they wanted to get a billion out of the supply chain and reinvigorate it with diverse suppliers. When they came to the table, 4 out of the 7 participants wanted to talk DEI, not supplier diversity, and said the supplier diversity thing doesn't matter for D&I. And we said, it's not D&I, it's DEI. And the notion of supplier diversity, which is what was contracted right now, actually is as important to diversity, equity, and inclusion as anything else. When you hire one person and you bring them through the corporate chain, you've activated a household, insurance, college, and stability in that household. When you hire a diverse supplier, you've now just affected 50 households. So people bring very painful ideas into a non-contextualized conversation around DEI all the time. For this one here as a barrier, the idea of DEI being a course or training feels like the barrier, because it feels like, check the box, we're done. And it sounds like what this person is really saying here is that DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, not DNI, because that's commonly how it's just kind of rolled through, is something that has to be integrated from a cultural perspective. When diversity, equity, inclusion is properly organized within the brand, it's impossible to be employed by that company without demonstrating and living inside of the brand guidelines, the expectations, and take it one step further into the values of that organization. What we find is 9 times out of 10, the real conflict for DEI issues sits not so much in the brand, but in the values of which the organization has been founded on, even when that organization is designed to elevate DEI issues.
But Blake, we've gone an hour and a half. Would you like people just to take breaks on their own, or would you
Absolutely.
like? Okay.
Absolutely. Feel free to take a break.
Okay.
I'm going to power through for us.
Good. You just keep going. Great.
I'll keep going. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. For the person who said that DEI, there was an opposite point of view on it. I just want to champion that person for saying that the way that you said it. Protect our organization from diversity, equity, and inclusion cultures. So I'm not exactly sure what you're saying here. I'm going to take it for a minute, even if this is serving a motive of ours and not yours. So forgive me if I do this wrong, but oftentimes the notion of forcing diversity, equity, and inclusion for the sake of forcing it is actually more harmful to the organization because it isn't tied in at the mission and bottom line level. It's just forced in as a strategy, which creates a whole new set of barriers. And so we see this all the time where we champion the notion of it, but we don't pay attention or honor what that decision-making is doing to the operational promise of the brand. And when those aren't aligned, it actually is far more hurtful. So I just wanted
when you said, Brooke, that this was what, but both of these are connected to values, and there would have to be shared values.
Correct.
Yeah.
And they have to tie in at the operational promise. So let's keep going because I want to make sure we get to that. Okay. Now that you broke it down, does the strategy and its tactics tied to it, are they a good use of resources? This is a gut check. And if you answered no, reprioritize it and move on to the next. This is something that we want to teach people to think about and do. It means kill the strategy. If it's not helpful and it's not going to do what you need to do, it's not going to overcome the barrier, get rid of it. And so often what we do is we nurture strategies and we invest in them. And what they're doing is distracting us, derailing us, or not helping us meet our financial goal. It might sound good, it might be nice, and it might make us feel good, but it doesn't mean it's designed to help meet our objective, overcome a barrier, and hit that financial goal. So just do a gut check on that, test it yourself. We're going to move on. This is another gut check on strategies itself, because strategies they rule what it is we're going to spend our time and energy and resources on. So when you think about it, what is it that you're investing in most often? And this is one to be honest with yourself. We won't know, but you'll be able to see. Is it hope, energy, time, or cash flow? And most often, non-for-profits ignore the reality and the fundamental requirement of cash flow. There might be a founder that's the primary funder, so it doesn't seem important because they're going to close the gap for us. That leads to complete unrest if you think about it. Even though your kid doesn't want to clean their room, when they get their allowance, they feel accomplishment. Our staff is no different. So are we investing in hope, energy, time, cash flow? So oftentimes we'll also will expend energy inside of a 501c3 or 501c, a mission-based operation, because we believe that it isn't, that we're doing it for the good of the whole. We believe that it's something that we believe in, that it's a labor of love, regardless of whether it's a labor of love or not. It still needs to be financially funded, or everything else in your world and your staff's world and your board's world goes into tilt. So we want to make sure that when we're investing energy, that is driving back to helping us accomplish a financial goal. We absolutely don't want to be investing in hope. Our beneficiaries get hope. We bring them hope. We provide hope. We promise hope. But if we're investing into our brand and getting our objectives met to reach our financial goals through hope, we're going to find ourselves coming up short. It's dangerous. And by doing that, even though we have the best of intentions and our hearts are so wonderful, we're making it so we can't actually deliver on the position and promise, the delivery of what we operationally provide to those beneficiaries. And now we have a real problem. And so we want to make sure that we move hope into positive uses of energy. We want to make sure that our time, which is different than our energy, time is the actual time you allocate on a calendar to make sure you get something done. And if the time that we're spending isn't getting us to our financial objective, we are actually doing things that harm our brand. Remember, our brand protects our financials, our culture, our employees, and our market share. It protects our reputation. If we're doing things that from a time standpoint that take away from that, then we're not strengthening the brand. We're not supporting the brand platform. We're taking away from it. And the same thing is from a cash flow standpoint. If we make a decision to invest in something and it isn't for the long-term benefit of the brand so that we can ensure that financial goal on an annual basis, what we're doing is we're making it harder for us to secure that financial goal. We are weakening the brand. So we want to make sure that the decisions that we're making are really, really good ones and that they're investing for the right reasons at the right times. Okay. So audience, and this is the most controversial. If you weren't in alignment with some of the things I said before, this one sets people off for weeks, and we'll find them come back to us and go, I really hated you when you said this, but I was sitting in a meeting and oh my goodness, did this start to come true? So I'm sorry for hating you and all the horrible things I said in your head. Can you help us with this? Okay. So think about it like this. And 501c3s and executive directors and passion-driven and mission-driven never want to think like this. But until you do, you're going to live in a world of instability that just keeps happening. So you only have $1 to spend. And you need to use that dollar to talk to the absolute most important person that is going to believe in your promise, because they're going to pay you. Listen to what I'm saying. They're going to pay you $3 for what it is you promised to do. You need those $3 because you need to pay yourself. You need to pay for the cost of what it is that you operationally deliver. And you need another dollar to go out and find the next person that's going to pay you $3 for what it is you promise. Okay. And you can't split that dollar up. If you split the dollar up, you're weakening the outcome. You're not going to meet your goals. You're killing the brand. You're creating disarrest. You're not in alignment with your brand or the team, and you're going to be questioned and held accountable, and it's going to all fall apart. That's a little dramatic, but not so off from what we all go through. So before we dig a little bit further into that, we're asking the question, how would you best describe your revenue? Is it stable, dependable, and repeatable? Is it healthy and joyous? Is it predictable, empowering? Is it a roller coaster? Is it a stomach ache?
Okay,
Now
you can answer this question. You're saying with this question, we can answer more than one on this.
You can.
Okay, thank you.
Because you can have stable, dependable, and repeatable revenue that's also healthy and joyous. You can have a stomach ache, but it's predictable. What we're going to do is very quickly touch on what those things mean as it relates to your brand and how you reconcile things within your team around this. So audience is single-handedly the most electrifying and reconciling oriented asset in a brand, specifically when we work with nonprofit. So half the team will walk in, just stay on that slide for a second. Sorry, I know you're trying to help me move, but what happens is that, especially when we're in a mission-based operation, We believe 100% with our hearts and souls that the audience the brand serves is the beneficiary. And how many people believe that that's true? You can nod your head, you can agree in your head. What I'm going to say right now is usually very polarizing. When your brand's audience is your beneficiary, and you spend this $1 on your beneficiary, you're getting how many dollars back?
Negative.
Correct. When we organize the audience around the most primary healthy donors, what happens is that our brand promises something to that donor that is in service of the beneficiary. It's called a halo glow for the audiences. So when we hail to the donor in a way that is in service also of our employees and of our beneficiaries, we create an alignment through the entire organization as to what it is we do and who we serve every day and how we do that. So that doesn't mean that we don't communicate with our beneficiaries. It doesn't mean that we don't communicate with our employees. It doesn't mean that we don't communicate with our board. If you think about it, a beneficiary can, and if served properly, will one day be a donor out of gratitude. We find in our research that some of our most loyal donors to the organizations that we represent, whether it's American Red Cross, whether it is UCAN Chicago, Magdalene House, go through all the different 501c3s that we've touched over time, the most loyal, focused, and contributing donors are coming from people who were at one time a beneficiary, right? When you think about it like that.
Brooke, I just want to remind the group, or you can help remind me, our very first slide said that our branding is for the purpose of growing financial capacity.
Correct.
Not too far. So we need to understand that all these slides, all of these elements, etc., for today's objective is to have finances where they need to be. I'm sorry, just repeat what I said, but make it more clear.
Your finances are 100% supported by your brand platform. Your brand platform ensures your culture, your employees, your market share, your donor base, and your financials. Your brand platform is multiple assets that work together to help define what you will do and will not do as a brand. It creates alignment for everyone who touches that brand. The audience is a definition of who the brand serves. The operations may serve the beneficiaries every single day. I'll give you an example. Magdalene House, Chicago, where I board chair. I'll give you a different one. UCAN Chicago. They operationally serve youth, families, and communities. That's who they operationally serve. Their primary audience is their most beneficial donors. They are looking to attract on a regular basis donors that have high net worth, high capacity, and high appetite to volunteer, right? So that they can provide stable operations on an everyday basis for the youth, the families, and the communities that they serve.
Okay.
Right? They need that stable, dependable, repeatable fundraising capacity so that they can provide the programming to the beneficiaries. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the beneficiary is not the customer, the donor is the customer.
Correct. And it's polarizing sometimes because we go to work and we believe that the work that we're doing is very, very meaningful, and it is absolutely. And the reason that we have this rest with people is that we don't have the funding for the programming, or we don't have the clear conversations to talk about what we should be funding, or we don't have the ability and the lexicon to come together on those things. And oftentimes it's because as an organization, we don't have the ability to respect the value of the audiences that we serve. And that's one of the most primary lightning bolt moments that we have. And believe me, we have been inside of boards that have 4 or 5 orientations of boards inside of them, where by the time we get to the final board for final approval, the primary founding funder wants me out of the room. But let's keep going. I hope that helps shed some light, because when your staff member understands that you care about the funding that is also going to pay them, and they are part of helping you achieve that, they go from resisting and fighting to being in line. When you understand that the fear in that staff member is that they don't know if they're going to get a paycheck again, and that you need to talk openly about how this brand ensures that, and they now have language that they could use that they feel that they align with. Now you have alignment, and now you're going to get someone who kind of, reaches out to you and is like, hey, listen, I've been thinking about this one thing, and now you have a whole new revenue stream.
Brooke, just so everybody's clear, for instance, I think you started out by saying branding has 10 elements. Did you say that?
The brand platform that we're talking through today, how we help organizations reconcile alignment, stems from a platform of 10 assets. We are now talking about the 6th of 10.
Which is insight, is one of those assets. Objectives was one of those assets.
Yes.
Barriers was one of those assets.
We cultivate our assets so that we can have common conversations, we can have alignment, so that we can move through our everyday operations and nail our promise, nail our position, so that the audience that is most important to us will continue to fund our needs. And that's true for profit or non. That does not change no matter how you look at it. So now let's talk about insight. And this is one of the most powerful things inside of an organization. It is the breakdown of how we create empathy for those that we want to change a behavior, a belief, or evoke an action in. So oftentimes you'll hear people talk about, especially if you're going to engage in a marketing plan, they'll say, what do you want people to think, do, feel? Okay, this is the way you get to that in a way that ensures your financial integrity over time with the right audience. So once we know who the right audience is, we can talk about this. Observation is something that happens in the world around them. So I picked the language up a little while ago. I used high net worth donors. High net worth donors might be someone who is, and let me even build it out a little bit further. Let's talk about someone who has committed $100,000 over 5 years, right? That's their donation pace. The same is true for someone who donates monthly on $5. Okay, so let's just understand it affects the spectrum, but I'm going to use this. Okay, so the observation is that inside of the high net worth donor of $100,000 on an annual basis of a commitment 5 years, is that at the beginning of their commitment, we were inside of one presidency. At the end, we were inside of another, which means the tax laws are changing for them 3 years from now. That's going to affect major gifting. Observational truth, it's happening to them, has nothing to do with us. We don't own this. This isn't specific to my mission, your mission, or her mission. This is just the reality of the high net worth donor. Let's say that there's a behavioral truth. The behavioral truth is that they're going to be looking for ways to mitigate or change or be able to retain the most amount of wealth while giving at the same time. And the behavioral truth is that they're going to reach out for education, they're going to reach out to advisors, etc. They're going to participate in things like this, right? At the same time, they're probably going to become hesitant and they're going to want to plan. These are behavioral truths. They're going to have an unmet need, which is a way to plan through how they're going to get from presidential experience A and tax laws to presidential and experience B tax laws. Remember, brands are all about helping us get from A to B, not just us, but also those in which we touch. And that unmet need is going to be a place to solve this need. Now, the donor may be not financially incentivized. They might be mission incentivized. They may be someone who, it might be that we find that the highest value donors also have lived the trauma in which we're solving. That would have a slightly different behavioral truth, right? But I picked something that was sort of, could work for any of us right now, in terms of just kind of stabilizing this concept. So then we're going to say, this is what our brand offers that donor. Our brand offers a multi-year ask that allows you to see the beneficiaries over time, staying in touch. We provide these reports and these details so that you can then go back and justify it within your organization. I gave that as just a simple example. There's thousands of ways in which you can look at this, but you could see none of those are ownable to any of us on this call. It is something that is a fundamental truth, observational, that you can see. The behavioral truth is something that they're going to behave inside of. And the unmet need is something that they need solved. And our brand, based on our operations, what we've invested in, what we promise, who we employ, all those things that are part of our support, but what is it that we offer them in plain language that helps solve their unmet need? Now, we want to start paying attention. You want to noodle on this. You want to ask around. You want to think about it. Let me explain what we mean by that. Ask 6 or 7 of your primary donors that are most healthy and joyous for your organization, that allow you to have levels of stability. You want to find out what's happening for them. And then you want to look at their answers and you want to say, where's the consistency? You want to ask them, what is your unmet need? How is our brand offering you something? Why do you stay connected to us? And don't name your organization. Say, how is our brand offering you something? You want this to be a conversation. It's also a relationship moment, but that's a no-cost way to do this. A some-cost way might be to ask somebody to help you manage a survey. And a low-cost way may be to ask someone to help you manage a survey. Some cost might be to say, look, I need a research track to get this answered. Define noodle. Terry Ross, thank you. Noodle, like ask around about it. Ask people, make them answer you, write it down, and then think about it. Step back and look at it and say, this person said this, what are they really saying to me? This person said this, what are they really saying? And you can ask them all 4 of these things. You can say, what's happening in your world? Fill in the answer. What is it that you do every day as a reaction or a response to that? What isn't getting met on your behalf? Like what's, and it could be anything. They're going to tell you. And then ask them, okay, how does my brand help you? And then you sit, again, take a cup of coffee, glass of wine, whatever. Sit down and think about that. Because what they may tell you you offer may be very different than what you believe you do every day or what you believe is most important about what you're doing every day. And then you have to kind of check the mission. So what is it that you're going out and offering donors that you're going to solve for them or that they're going to get out of being a participant in your mission? How does that relate to what it is your mission actually delivers every day? Because if you're talking to donors that are going to restrict you or constrain you in a way that makes it so you can't operate for your beneficiaries, your staff's going to be really uncomfortable. You're going to have a lot of unrest. And that happens to be true for so many of us. So, Terry, I hope I helped define noodle. I might have over-defined it. But noodling is whatever's within your comfort. Sorry?
You did. Thank you.
Okay. It's a good question. So, positioning. We want you to know your competitors. We want you to think about this. When you go back to your audience and you think about the world in which they live in, what's their category? What is the competitive set that you're sitting inside of? We're all competing for dollars. right? Are you in the space for Magdalen House Chicago? We are competing on a regular basis for people who provide residential solutions for people through funding. And we know that. We also are competitive with shelters, domestic abuse of violence, and a series of other drug and rehab oriented. And we're none of those, but we know that we're competing with them. So you define your competitors. They're not always who you think they are, but who is it that you might lose out a grant to, right? Where else are dollars that could be going to you being spent? So where do they sit in the space or category? So let me explain that. We all sit inside of a category. Sometimes we sit outside in a category of one, and that's very rare, but highly valuable. Where you sit in the category, are you the dependable one? Are you the innovative one? Are you the cheap one? Are you the fast one? Are you the one that reports all the time? Are you the one that is scientific? Are you the proven? Do you see where this is going? We're all inside this pie of what's called the category, but we each sit in different spaces. And those spaces are our positioning. You can have the same positioning as someone else. It doesn't mean that they do the same thing as you, but you can have the same positioning. 7 people can sit inside of the positioning of residential inside of sex trafficking. But we all deliver on that positioning. Our promise, which we're going to talk about in a second, is different. So where do you sit inside this category? I'll give you an example. We can go to the next page. Before I give the example, we wanted to just help people start to think about it and reconcile within themselves. And when you see this, when you see the difference between what you're going to write here versus once we explain positioning, you're going to understand very quickly if there is a reconciliation for those who wanted to reconcile internally and those who wanted to reconcile externally. You're going to very quickly see what reconciliation feels like within yourself. And if you take that out to all the others, you're going to have a whole lot of positive potential. So what is your current positioning? Don't think, just put it out there. So one person put accessible, one person put reliable. Let's keep going. So what that means is in your category, for the others that serve the purpose that you serve in a similar way or in a tangential way, you're the accessible version of it. The long-standing, the reliable, we've got a couple of reliables. You're the diverse. Available, dedicated, and passionate. The awesome one. The consistent and reliable. Intergenerational solution. You're the unique, reliable, competent solution. The service-oriented. So when you go to meet someone, you go to interact with them, you say, hi, I'm from company or organization X. We are the most long-standing in serving human sex trafficking. Now, that may be very, very true, and it may be very valuable for your positioning, but let's talk about what positioning really means. Let's jump to the next slide. Our positionings protect us. People don't ever think about brands in terms of protection, but the positioning assets specifically inside your brand, inside of your organization, your operation, this is one of the most strongest tenets inside of your platform. It's what you're going to bounce against the hardest on a daily basis, both from your staff, from your board, from the rest of your donors. And this is the thing that people push us around and make us lose our way, is our positioning. Let me explain. Positioning pushes away what we don't want. That's employees, it's caustic donors. Remember the person who asked about toxic employees or toxic leadership? It pushes toxic leadership away from us before we ever even have to get involved with them. And it drives them out faster than screaming behind them, shaking a fist. It calls in what we do want. It calls in the ones who aren't toxic. It calls in the ones that believe in what we're doing and align with our values, our position, our promise. That's employees that belong working for us. That is the character that we want. That is the type of donation that we want. It aligns us with the grants that are going to make sense for us. It is not ownable. It is provable. So a lot of what you're seeing us do here and that we're talking about inside this proven methodology stems from the fact that I myself have spent 30 years as an expert testimonial witness for brands. That means I have to sit inside of boardrooms or ante rooms or conference halls or courtrooms, quite frankly, and help people understand what technically is or isn't inside of their brand platform, which is why we believe so strongly in the platform, inside of their 10 assets as to whether or not you could prove that their brand should or shouldn't be given, granted, or taken from it what somebody else says or wants, right? So while we say it's not ownable, but it is provable, it means we can technically prove it. And if you think about it, the last 8 assets that we have talked through can technically be proven in a court of law. It is the X of the Y in the category. So real quick, the way the X of the Y category works.
You got me there. You got me there, Brooke. Okay, you went all the way. You know, positioning is not ownable, but it's provable. Sounds cute, but I think you're really serious that if it's not provable in a court of law, it's not a position.
Yeah.
Wow.
So remember, we went all the way to saying you want to remove all vagaries when we talk about objectives, right?
Right.
Okay. If I had a client that was being challenged on whether or not they were or weren't the fastest in the industry, they either can or cannot prove that they are the fastest in the industry. That means they have to be able to prove what defines the industry, the why of the category. They have to be able to prove what their claim is and what the top 3 competitors' claims are. You're setting an industry standard with the top 3, and you're stating that you're faster. If you can't prove that, then you have misleading marketing out there and you're being sued. It's that simple. Everyone's positioning is provable. Oftentimes, what CEOs and executive directors lose sleep over is that the board is pushing in one direction, the staff is pushing in another, and the positioning is being diluted. And when the positioning is being diluted, those of us in roles of accountability can no longer protect. And it's so simple. It is so complex when you're sitting inside of it. And it sits under a stack of misinformation, decisions, misinterpretation, misunderstandings that start all the way with our financial goal. It sits hidden inside of our barriers. It's misdiscussed as an objective that isn't getting measured properly. It doesn't get strengthened by a strategy. We're focused on the wrong audience. We aren't paying attention to the insights. And so we sit there with a position that we cannot protect. And if we're feeling that way, the board feels that way, and the staff feels that way. And so when we talk about it and we say audience is the most electrifying asset, this is the most galvanizing. Because when people start to realize that they have an ability to see the tangibility of the asset of the positioning, they go, oh, this is where I sit too. I'm in alignment. Okay, so let's jump to the next. We're over time. Okay, thank you. Anybody that needs to drop off, you can. I'm going to just talk through the rest of the assets as quickly as I can.
I did go ahead and post the list of them. So for the people that were asking for that list, it's in chat.
Okay. And if anybody wants to say thank you for staying. Now that we've talked through positioning, does it support your mission? Remember, the mission is purpose-based and it really ties in hard to the promise, but the positioning supports it, it protects it. I love that we're seeing 5 people say, yes, it protects it. Yes, it supports it. That's fantastic. And the confidence of knowing that just through this dialogue and deconstructing what a brand platform is will help you feel an empowerment when you go to talk about it. All right, we're going to keep moving. Now, would you change your positioning? How? I'm going to keep us moving, but this is a place to be thoughtful about it. Promise is the core of your story. It's the core of your story is your brand promise. It's what you can operationally promise day in and day out. This is what Jayne Agency promises day in and day out to help people be able to deliver on their promise. Okay, so let's talk about that. The core of your story is your brand promise. So when you would shake someone's hand and you say, my position, or when someone says, hey, Brooke, what do you do? And I say, well, I drive brand alignment. And they say, how do you do that? We do that through clarity. We deliver smartly strategic, wickedly creative, response-driven outcomes. Tell me more. At this point, I may have been able to diagnose a little bit about what they're interested in, and now I can dig into the support that upholds my promise. Now let's talk about this. Promise is the value. It's the value of what you provide. Magdalene House provides beds to women. Yes. However, what they're really doing is providing the ability for someone to heal so they can become a positive, contributing, self-directed member of society. The value of providing a bed might get me $5 in donations, but the value of helping someone heal so that they become a contributing member of society that can then go in and heal others gets us grants, and it gets us year-over-year donations. See how the difference, the support are the people you employ, the types of services, the programming, the length of time you've been there. So when we say longest standing and we make that our positioning, that's actually also an element of support. When we sell or we merchandise or we raise funds based on support, we're commoditizing what we do. The value of what we do is the highest level of our mission. Commoditizing it means that someone's buying into the detail of our support, not the value of it. And that becomes something that's easily distracted and can easily be provided by somebody that's in our competitive set. So when we talk about promise and position, the position is where we sit in the category. The promise is the value we provide. When we put those two things together, we're able to really start protecting our ability to offer inside of insight to the audience that's most valuable to us, that delivers in response to and reacts to our strategies the right way, so that we can overcome our barriers and we're able to meet our objectives and we're able to sustain our financial goals. And when our beneficiaries are able to receive on that, they're getting the stability of what we offer. When our employees see that, they've got healthy careers, they're contributing members, they see where things are going, they're in alignment. When our board sees that, they go out and they raise with far more aptitude, they're far more engaged in the fundraising process, they're supportive, and they're no longer picking on everyone on the inside, right? So now let's just dig real quickly into, we're going to skip to support. Well, let's do this one real quickly. Go back real quick. Which of the following sounds most accurate as it relates to impact? And just go through, take a second to fill this in. The reality is when your impact is easy to measure and easy to report on, it means that what you promised is of the highest value to the donors that you need to, and you're able to manage against your financial realities, you're able to protect the entire rest of the brand. When it's hard to report on, it means there's a disconnect between what you've promised to the beneficiaries and what you've promised to the donors. And we see that happen all the time. So I'm going to keep going. So this is a way to think about this. What is it that you deliver every day, day in and day out of value, resisting promising details? Now, before you answer this, look at the picture on the left. Which person do you view yourself as? Are you feeling like you're the person hanging off that cliff, or are you the person that's standing on that mountain holding someone up? It matters because of your perspective. And that perspective has everything to do with what you promise and who you promise it to, and where you see your organization, your brand inside of the promise that happens between yourself and the donor or the fundraiser or the financial audience that you need to be thinking about. In reality, most of us see us as ourselves hanging off that cliff. And we're seeing the funding is the support structure. In reality, we're the support structure, and it's the donors that are believing in us saying, hey, I hope that you are going to do the right thing with what I'm giving to you based on what your brand is and what your promise is, that outcome is going to be that you use this the right way and you come back and you are able to deliver on your promise in the form of a story and a report that I can believe in. But they're the ones hanging off the cliff, taking the leap of faith in us. And when you rethink it like that, you think about that like for your staff, for your board, for your beneficiaries, and you think about the fact that the brand itself is what's standing on that cliff, holding everything else together. Okay, so let's keep going. Support is how you prove your promise. Remember, I introduced that notion of a court of law around positioning. Support is how you prove out that promise. It's proof that resources are being handled properly, and it's repeatable, dependable, and tangible. Remember, I said, if you're able to report and tell your story easily, it's because your support is in alignment. It's because the people you've hired are in alignment with your position and promise, and they're delivering on it. It's because the beneficiaries are showing the impact and are able to articulate and be able to share that story. It's because the funders can see that and they're able to take confidence and they feel like they're willing to hang off that cliff with you because they trust you. But the support really is how you prove your promise. Most of us go in the room and we offer our support before anything else, and it leaves us vulnerable and we end up feeling like we're the ones hanging off that cliff. So proof that your resources are being handled properly, when you think about it like that, and you think about the fact that that is your brand platform, your support upholds your promise. It's how you prove it in a court of law. Your promise is the value that you're giving to people. It's what makes your positioning special and unique inside of the area or the category that you exist inside of, so that the audience that you know is right for you will signal you out, be loyal, remain to you, that you can protect them, that your competitors can come to them year over year over year, and maybe they'll get $1, but they won't get your $5. Now we're really talking about being able to support this. And it's not so important that we can support it in a court of law, it's that we can support it with the newest team member that we just hired. It's with the most long-standing board member. It's with the most important donor that might be the newest one inside of our $10 donation that's going to one day become our biggest donor. Now we're seeing the cycle. Okay, so support. All of these assets are provable in a court of law. Let's go to the last one. And the way that we force people to think about support is that when you make your promise, inside of your promise are things that have to be proven. If you sit down and you write a list of the things that you have to support to prove that, you're going to start being able to see where your support sits that proves out your promise. It's listing. Okay, so let's keep going. This asset starts out not being technically provable. Over time, it is provable in a court of law, but this is the warm fuzzy. The 9 others that we just shared with you are technical. And when we are not in alignment through the board, through the C-suite, through the funders, through the staff, it's because technically things are not being handled, talked about, shared, committed to, aligned with the right way. Tone and personality is the emotional asset. It sets the whole thing in motion or it shuts it down. Tone is what you say, it's how you say it, it's the words you use. Personality is how you act, what you do, and what you stand for. This is where things like the logo, the name, the tagline hail from. They start from here. They have to deliver on the rest of the brand platform, but the beginning of the creative brief starts right here, every time, all the time. So when tone and personality are working in alignment inside of a mission, everyone feels like that mission's delivering on all pistons. It's high powered. You see donors locking in left and right. You see staff people reaching their potential. You see board members just coming in, getting what they need done, giving their value, giving their guidance, and going, yeah, nope, we nailed it. We're doing good. When they're not in alignment, it's all over the place. Tone and personality is the first thing that just sets that on the wrong orbit or sets it on the right one. Let's talk about why real quick. When you are hitting someone in a tone that's off, what happens? You get in a fight, you get in an argument. You don't hear anything that the other person is saying. So when a brand's tone is off, all the other 9 assets don't matter, especially in an emotional environment or a 501c3. So having everything else technically organized, but the tone and personality of the organization, if it's flat, it's tired. If it's off, it's combative. If it's in alignment, it's love. And that's when you see people say, I love working here. I love donating here. I love what this organization has done for me. I love having benefited from this. So, tone and personality, the warm fuzzy. Eventually, it becomes provable. Eventually, you have enough instances, and it could be everything from a brochure to an event, to a conversation, to a solution that you created in the marketplace. Tone and personality regulates the 9 other technical assets of the brand, but it also is the thing that touches our hearts and our souls. Okay. I'll give you an example on tone and personality. Jayne is relentless, we're relevant, we're analytical, and we're unleashing, right? So take a second to think about what are the words, no hyphens, what are the words that make up your tone and personality? And one of the best hacks that we've seen, because we've watched clients come and talk to us, both in the 501c3 space, as well in the nonprofit space, as well as in the private sector space. And this is the place where they spend a ton of money and don't get the business results or the alignment that they need. So just throwing words out there. There are common ones in given sectors, verticals, etc. And you want to take 1 or 2 of those, and then you want to create your own. And I'll give it a second to fill in. Actually, I think since we're over time, I should probably keep going. I'm going to keep going. So timing, Veronica, we don't have time to do this.
No,
And I'm
hold on. No, Brooke, this is supposed to be from 10 a.m. to 1. So maybe you think you're over time, but it's 12:19 here.
Oh. Hey, way to get me to be on time.
Thank you.
I'm not watching the clock. I'm just watching, someone was putting notes in there saying that we were over time. So we're good.
Yes, thank you. Doing a great job.
Great. I should disclose this to everyone on here. I have dyscalculia. So me looking at a clock isn't helpful. So dyscalculia hits on the numeric concepts from a disability standpoint, which is why Veronica's here and everyone else on my team is responsible for whether or not we're on time for things. So, all right. I'm so excited.
Brooke, if I may say, it took me a minute to realize that there was sets of slides for each of these assets: goals, objectives, barriers, strategies, audience, insight. It wasn't until position I realized that we were looking at the 10 assets of this particular branding platform. This all comes together now for me in a different way. Thank you for this list.
It's hard to talk about it until we go through it. I think we were missing a slide in here that showed the list at first where I would have explained that. So I do apologize to everyone. But now that we're looking at the list, these are the 10 assets that everybody has gone through and been educated and instigated on today. And so what we wanted to do is say, which are the 2 that we want to dig back into? Wow, look at that starting to sort itself out. Isn't it fun to watch everybody's feedback come in?
It is. That's pretty cool. Menti.com.
Okay, so it looks like, I'm going to give it 1 more second because sometimes it takes a while for it to, yeah, there you go. It looks like the 2 that we're really settling in on though is strategies and promise. Does that sound good to everybody that we'll go do a deep dive on those?
I would just like, if we have, I would love to hear live interactive questions where people are turning their cameras on and talking when we have time.
Absolutely.
For it. This is completed.
Absolutely.
And that's what we'll do for each of these. So the next slide is either you can put in your questions in Mentimeter, or we can just have a conversation live. So
Yeah, it's still settling in at promise and strategies. Okay, why don't we take promise and strategies and
let's start with promises on this one.
yeah. Okay. So throw a couple questions out around promise and we'll dig into that.
Friends, if you're so inclined, let me, we may even want to turn the deck off, just so we can have we go into gallery view.
That's fine, yeah.
Yeah, and everybody go into gallery view. And if you're so inclined, turn your camera on. We would just love for you to load bear. And good to see you.
Hi, everybody.
Take it away.
Hi! To see the people that are in the chats and stuff. So nice.
So do we raise our hands or do we just blurt out the question?
Just jump in there, Terry.
Okay, my question is regarding promise, and I just need clarity here. Promise is the operational.
It's what you do every day, day in and day out.
Okay, that's what I thought you said, but I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
But I wouldn't say it's operational in that sense, or it permeates every aspect of operations, maybe is the better way to put it.
Well, but it is. I mean, I'm not looking to, challenge what you're trying to communicate, but you either do have an operation that is set up to deliver what you promise, or you have an operation to set up something else that you're not promising properly. It's
So
literally,
Terry got it right. That's good.
yeah, I mean, it technically, so and out of fairness to my extremism on it, sitting on a witness stand, I've had to be able to prove that organization never promised what someone was claiming that they were accusing them of and suing them for. Right?
Wow.
So when you look at it like that, it changes the my opinion, your opinion of what branding is. And it's like the promise is like I was able to intrinsically go in through support and say it would be impossible for them to have ever promised that. And it would be impossible for you to believe that you had bought that from them, because here is their marketing materials. Here is the equipment that they have. Here's the locations they have, and what you're claiming couldn't have happened.
What does Magdalene House Chicago promise?
2 years of cost-free living that includes trauma-informed care, sober living, and workforce development. Actually, the true promise, that's actually the support of the promise. The true promise is the ability for survivor leaders to develop into a life of her choice.
That's the promise.
That's the promise. Sorry.
And then what sounded a little bit more missional was support.
Correct.
I missed that. Can you restate that promise one more time, please?
The ability for survivor leaders to develop into a life of her choice.
And that is supported by
2 years of cost-free living, right? I love how you're helping me do this. Thank you. 2 years of cost-free living, trauma-informed care, and workforce development, which we just recently launched as a social or as a justice social enterprise. So we are changing that piece of support out to live up to what we finally were able to launch.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but tell me about the other organization that you're serving. What's its promise? What's its name? What's its promise, and how is it supported?
So you can, so their mission is helping youth who have suffered trauma turn into our future leaders. That's their mission. That actually used to be their promise. Their promise is now helping youth, families, and communities reach the power of their true potential.
I wish I could say this is just semantics, but we get so messed up in nonprofits by talking about our activities.
Correct.
Instead of promising and clarifying what our impact is.
I would say if there's any painful part of the role we do. It sits inside of the realities of DEI, supplier diversity conflicts, because the reality of what that is very dark and ugly. And also the moments where we have to help the nonprofits that we work with move out of what they hold so dear as their everyday delivery and move them to a place of true promise so that they can achieve the goals that they want. And it's hard because people are emotional and they get very, very angry and they get hostile and they resent the organization for the organization's need to grow and sustain them. And oftentimes it is coming from inside the staff and the board.
I'm going to ask 3 other people to be prepared to jump in once Brooke and I stop having this private conversation in front of you. And I will just, what is this? Harvest Town Food Bank provides donors, advocates, and volunteers the organization they require to serve Columbia's hurting, hungry, and homeless. Is that a support or is that a promise?
I mean, I would need to see it on screen to start dissecting it.
Sure.
But it sounds like 3 or 4 things at once, but really it sounds like a mission with a little bit more in it.
Gotcha. Thank you. Who's next?
By
Go
the way,
ahead, Jimmy.
By the way, Jimmy, the conversation is not private. We're all here listening.
Oh, thank you, Terry.
Well, I hope the reality of what you're saying, Terry, is that it's beneficial. Because what's more fun than watching me be put on the spot?
Amy had a question.
Yeah, like getting back to addressing conflict internally with our staff and board. How do you have any insight on refreshing, updating, developing internal culture? We talked a lot about aligning, so our donors and our beneficiaries would see that, but how can we do it on the inside, especially when it's already been established in a way that's not working?
So this process, if you think about the way you felt going through this process and you felt at the beginning, the reality is everyone that touches the organization feels that. And so if you just sat down and said, hey, what do you think our goals are? What do you think our goals are? What do you think our goals are? You don't have to solve it. You don't have to facilitate or moderate that. But if you're the ED, you learning what people actually think the goals are is going to be so helpful for you in understanding the disalignment. And as you go through each asset, don't be defensive. Just hear what they say, and you're going to start to see the biggest areas of disconnect. And I will make this commitment to you. If you go through and do that process, I won't be able to solve everything for you in a half-hour phone call, but go through and do that. And if you pick out 2 of those things, I can give you a low cost, no cost, and some cost answer on how you can start to solve that and just start moving the wheels of the organization forward. Every little bit of alignment creates a level of faith and trust, right?
Okay.
And eventually what will happen is one leads to another, and that's what brands do. It takes you from point A to point B.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Who's
Can you-
next?
Oh, I don't want to dominate here, but
Go ahead, Terry. Go
my
ahead.
question is burning. Can you discuss no cost or low cost strategies for disalignment?
Yes. Oh, it's so loaded, huh? Really. And I being a board chair on 2 organizations, had you asked me this question 8 years ago, I might not have had the sensitivity I have today. So the no cost is the obvious answer, right? Because there's so much that goes on. And the example that actually I just gave, Amy, is that the right way to say your name?
It's Ami.
Ami. The example I just gave, Ami, is a no cost. Take this workbook that comes, once we're done, and go ask your staff these questions. Write the answers down. Let them see you writing. Don't answer anything. You don't have to mitigate anything. Then go sit with your leadership team. Do them separate. Then go sit with the board. Say to the board, I want to do this exercise. It's going to take about an hour and a half, but I want to see. If you want, send it out ahead of time, right? We believe so much in this methodology that we give it away to people for free. Because if it helps a little bit, then a year from now, you do the same exercise, you're in a different place, your fundraising is healthier, your staff is healthier, your recruitment is easier, your beneficiaries are stronger, your story is stronger, and maybe it's not as strong as it could be, but it's strong enough. And now you're in a place where you can invest some cost. Now you might need to say, look, all right, so we're understanding that we have a disconnect with our donors. We need to do some research. Hey, Jayne Agency, or my friend's daughter who does research, can you help me with this? And now it's a sum cost. And then you're organizing yourself further. And maybe 3-4 years down the road, you're in a place where you can actually really invest in having somebody take the whole organization through the brand process to develop a brand platform that gives you the solidarity, the strength, the alignment, the pride that you need. But all along the way, you've been strengthening yourself, right? It starts out with no cost. Then maybe you invest some cost. Then maybe you invest completely in it. That is one way. Some other low cost, some cost, or low cost, no cost, some cost efforts in terms of alignment is you can go online and you can sign up for SurveyMonkey. It's free. And you can do what's called an employee culture survey. You're going to learn a lot. You can also engage in a client satisfaction survey. And all you do is click in it, rename it donor survey.
By the way, you're saying those two templates are kind of already set up and are relevant in the way that they're already rolled out.
No cost, no time, just go do it.
Great.
Right? Now, what you may not know what to do with is the results.
Mhm.
So analyzing the results might be a place where you invest low cost. Right? If you really want to overhaul what's happening, you may hire someone to come in for some cost to do the whole process, come back to you with what's called insights and strategic imperatives. So there's a few others. I don't know if those two helped.
In 10 seconds, what is the difference between branding platform, strategic planning? Yeah, let's just use those two. What's the difference between a branding platform and strategic planning?
A branding platform is like a diving board. You bounce off of it all the time. It's the 10 assets organized. And no matter what you do, you go back to it and you bounce off of it. Strategic planning is the act of saying, by December 31st, I'm going to know what I'm spending my time and energies in from a strategic standpoint for the next year.
One of your assets of the 10 pillars of the branding platform is strategies. Is that where strategic planning falls?
So yes and no. So you could have a strategy that is, we are going to develop a strategic marketing plan for 2023-24, right? So you can have that as a strategy. The strategic plan itself, like I didn't name this stuff, so whoever did not do a great job of it. But the strategic planning process is the act of you and your team sitting down and creating those commitments that are going to help ensure you meet that goal so that your brand can do its job throughout this year, next year, and the year after to protect you.
Thank you.
Does that help?
It does. It's that change management plan in between that you have to do, because that's one of your strategies, was to have a plan for this aspect of our deliverable. I'm getting my head around it.
Yeah. And there's crossover between your strategic plan for the year and your strategic marketing plan, right? There's going to be crossovers, but your strategic marketing plan is in service of your strategic plan.
Well, there's a lot of different people on this call right now who are using major gifts ramp up as their financial capacity building plan. I will argue, though, that's just one strategy that they're using that doesn't consider all the other elements of your branding platform, Brooke.
However, if you have a brand platform, the ability to leverage Major Gifts Ramp Up is huge, right? Or you can use Major Gift Ramp Ups as a process to identify what's weak inside someone's brand.
Who's next, friends? Come on. I'm speechless. Keep going.
Never a dull moment, clarity.
Sherry, do you have Sherry Schwab? Do you have enough energy to say anything?
I think Anna had a question. She raised her hand.
Okay, great, Anna.
And first of all, I'm learning a lot. This is great, especially when it comes to staff and bringing staff together. But I sort of constructed a promise, and I want to run it by you.
Absolutely.
We're a creative arts center, an enrichment center for the disability community. And so the promise is to deliver a safe and stable environment that provides inclusive arts and education for people with disabilities, with the goal of acceptance and independence in society.
Do you mind dropping that in the chat?
Okay.
And I'm just going to say right up front, don't take anything I say verbatim and don't put it into action.
Sounds more like a mission statement, but
I'm committing malpractice by doing this. So just know I am not actually giving you counsel right now, but I'm going to look at this and see what we can do to see if we can help you a little. To deliver a safe and stable environment that provides inclusive arts and education for people with disabilities with the goal of acceptance and independence in society. So what are you delivering? So are you promising a safe and stable environment, or are you promising acceptance and independence in society?
well, it's probably the latter. Like, we do both, because in order to reach the goal of acceptance and independence, we need to provide the classes and the services in the most safe and stable environment. So they kind of go hand in hand. You cannot do one without the other.
I would argue that providing acceptance and independence in society is actually the value of the promise statement here. It's listed as a goal. It's not the goal. You don't hope to do that. See, the word hope just like with the goal of all of a sudden becomes we hope to. So you don't do that.
Or to enable acceptance would be a better word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but if no, it cannot be in your promise if it's a goal. A goal is something you're hoping to achieve. And the whole point of the brand platform is to remove hope out of your goal. Right? If you're you either do or don't provide the acceptance, and you either do or don't provide the independence.
Okay, then it has to be more concrete of a statement to provide adaptive arts and enrichment opportunities for people with disabilities.
So the adaptive arts language sounds in the space of a promise.
Okay.
We provide adaptive arts. And you can say so that a promise statement is constructed as a so that, but you could also say something like, we deliver adaptive arts for people with disabilities in a safe and stable environment. You're promising. You see that? Do you see how that works?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's nothing vague in that. There's no wiggle room. You can walk into the environments that you create and you can determine if they're safe and stable. You can prove that you are or are not delivering adaptive arts, and you can confirm that they are for people with disabilities.
Thank you. That clarifies everything for me, because that's almost like it's a powerful statement.
Yes.
You know? And it's, nobody has time for you to go through the 20-second explanation. This is short and sweet.
Yeah, should be like shooting an arrow right into the bullseye.
Okay, thank you.
But I hope that helped for everyone else to kind of see like how I peeled that away and peeled it apart. Like there's so much in there, but the reality is it starts to fall apart when you look at the words and you think about what it's saying and you put it in the context of the asset. Now, if she put that up there and said, this is my mission, I would have broken it down differently. And it might be, if it's helpful, I'll do that because a lot of times people get confused between mission and promise.
Well, that's what she said. This is a promise I've made. That's how she opened.
Right. If it's a promise, then you better be able to prove it and it's not wiggle room. A mission is the purpose and it has a lot more forgiveness in it, but it also acts as a guide. So let's take that same statement, remove the word promise and stick mission into it. I'm going to do that.
We love Marble Jam. Great job, Anna. Let's do 3 more questions, comments, and pushback, and then properly thank the Jayne Agency.
So look how this changes as a mission. The mission is to deliver. Well, can't be a mission because it's delivering. Delivering is inside of your promise.
Right.
But it could be the mission. We are on a mission for safe and stable environments that provide. It's so nope. It is solid in terms of her needing a promise statement. Can't do it.
Yeah.
See what happens?
Yeah, it's good. It feels like parlance, but it's not. It's not semantics. It's really great.
It's really technical. And what happens is the lack of technical confirmation sort of like hooks us unexpectedly, blindsides us in every conversation.
Let's bring this all the way back around, Brooke, because we promised reconciliation between different groups or different generations. The groups could be staff, volunteers, C-suite, board of directors. The generations could be Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, and then baby boomers. And you were saying if we eliminate disalignment through the 10 elements, that's what turns us into a different organization with maybe the same people or different people. But the active brand platforming creates a culture of unity.
Yes. By the mere nature of having to confirm technically what's real or not.
Thank you. By technically, intentionally investing in this process.
Yeah.
Yvonne posted a question in the chat.
You could. Absolutely. That is, we advance our mission by connecting people with disabilities. I don't know that it's saying a lot, but you can say that we're advancing our mission as a way to open up a mission statement.
That's what she's saying. There's dots at the end.
Yeah.
And
We don't say that's our mission, but in grant applications and other opportunities when we're being asked what our mission is, sometimes we say we advance our mission. And I wanted to make, it sounds a little, I don't know.
So what's happening there really in that statement is that you're not actually stating your mission. You're saying we advance our mission by, and then you actually have your promise sort of alluded to in there.
Oh, okay.
So what you're saying in that statement is we advance our mission, non-disclosed, by promising this.
Brooke, we 30 years ago, reductively, technically reduced all aspects of fundraising into an ordered, non-negotiable model. Now, if somebody came to this meeting today and thought, I've got a board member I dislike, or I've got a CEO that is persecuting me, or I'm a CEO and I've got staff members that are out of control. The idea that we would try to address those issues on a single issue basis is silly.
Overwhelming.
Versus going through this process to allow it to become part of the culture instead of swatting a fly that's only going to come back. Save me from myself, Brooke.
So sometimes we've seen a lot of success with people taking this platform and making a lot of headway. I mean, we have people who don't need us because we've given the thought capital and the approach away. The times that we get hired, and I should say this responsibly, the times that we get hired is when you need someone to come in and facilitate through it. And
The rules facilitate the what?
through it.
Facilitate through it.
So sometimes the behaviors and the actions and the attitudes, and you need somebody else to come in and say, yeah, this is not healthy, and here's how we're going to get through it.
Gotcha.
We have really, in probably 14 years, and I think we just shared a stat that we've done over 2,400 brand platforms directly, and we've impacted somewhere around 8,000 organizations through this process. We have very rarely had to stop a meeting and say, this is just not good. When we have, it's typically because there's either someone in a senior role that is really just terribly motivated in the wrong way, or the CEO has hired us to do something that is not in accordance with our brand values and their team. But generally speaking, what we have seen is some of the most difficult personalities or some of the most unfortunate situations have just fallen into alignment because A, they're being heard, B, they're hearing others, and C, we're forcing reconciliation through the process. Not just us, but anyone who took this format and tried to do it. The mere act of just listening and then stepping back and saying, okay, I heard you. These are the things I heard you say. This is how I think I'm going to handle it going forward now that I've heard you. It's hard not to respect that. And
What's
it's hard not
wonderful,
for
Brooke,
each of us to be transformed.
I think anybody would know that Jayne Agency or a facilitator, you guys are principled. I'm not coming in here to do the bidding of one board member to get somebody fired. Jayne Agency comes in as a third party that has a process whereby which everybody gets to be involved in, and at least everybody knows that it's not personal for you, which may make you more valuable as a facilitator.
Yeah, I would say that, and we get asked this question, so I'm going to jump into it. What's the hardest thing we've ever facilitated? And whenever I say this, people go, oh yeah, that was not pretty. We were asked to come in and facilitate for the ABA, the American Bar Association, which is a 501c3. And there's 12 section leaders. We're in the process of trying to dismantle the ABA itself. And our job was to come in and preserve the ABA or determine that it was not preservable. And let me tell you, those 12 lawyers came in ready to persecute Jayne as a whole and me. And in the end, they were all sitting on the floor, drawing pictures together and solving the world's problems. And it was brutal, but we got through it.
How gorgeous.
Yeah, it was quite the moment.
So a room full of litigators gave up on their arguments.
What we did was we didn't make them give up their arguments.
Mm-hmm.
We helped them find alignment in each other's.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it was the exact process we showed you here.
And I can tell you, this has been very helpful for our organization. We're not only just a multi-generational organization, we have a multi-generational board as well. And my CEO is on here now, and we are DMing each other on how we're going to go forward with this. So.
Yeah, it's good.
And so, Jimmy, you reached out to me a minute ago.
Hey, Sherry.
Hi, Jimmy. And what I've been thinking for a very big portion of this, and so initially I saw the webinar today and I thought, wow, that looks really interesting. I'm not really sure what it's all about, but it looks really interesting, and I trust NANOE and you. And so as we've gone through this today, it reminds me a lot of a Major Gifts ramp-up event. I'm going to have to digest it. It's been incredible information, very relevant. I'm almost understanding it.
I know.
So I look forward to the slides, the workbooks, and the recording, because it's going to have to be a do-over. And I don't know if that's just because I'm getting old or because I'm burned out from leading up to my event that I had last week. And it was an amazing success, but it took a lot of energy, and I'm a long way from being done with the whole campaign. And so I'm just trying to like digest all of it. But thank you to the Jayne Agency, because I will go back to it and make it something that I do understand and have the capacity to apply. Because there was a thing that happened recently at a board retreat that we had, and I don't really see a lot of unalignment between my staff and my board, although something surfaced when we were doing a strategic plan. And the mentality of the movement that I work in, which is domestic violence, is that, and we do an amazing job at intervention and providing services. What we really need to do is implement social change so that oppression no longer exists in our society. And so then oppression against women and all others isn't a thing. Won't be in my lifetime, but if you don't work on it now, it's not going to be in anybody's lifetime. And the board was like, well, we don't want to call it social change. Well, Jennifer, who is my board president and my boss, and she's an amazing woman, we just kind of let it go for the moment, because it will be called social change. Just telling you, it is what it is. I'm not going to soften it up. I don't really care about the politics of the area. It needs to be what it is. It needs to be clear, and people need to understand it. And so that's one thing that I think that, you know, I can start looking at applying some of this information to that. But thanks for an amazing day. And thanks to NANOE and everything that you all have provided. We've been working with the National Development Institute for a comprehensive campaign since I believe March or May. I have these 18 months worth of calendars on my wall. I should be able to tell you for sure the month of March. So, but, and so my time's kind of busy. I'm still trying to raise about $5 million to rebuild a shelter that was lost in a hurricane. And so it's not like I'm at a loss for things to do, but I won't let this escape my radar screen, because I see a lot of value in it. So thank you.
Brooke, we don't want, one thing at NANOE is we know the best thing we can do is pay. It's a great way to build capacity is to pay. Why don't you share, I have a question. For NANOE members, we can put this behind our password protected impact videos. Today's 3 hours, is that right?
Yes.
Now, was there also an associated handbook, or is the deck the handbook?
The deck is the handbook.
Okay, is it all right if we get a PDF of that so it can accompany the video?
Absolutely.
Then
you mentioned a workbook, so I don't know if that's.
It's the same. The questions force you to think through it.
Okay.
Yeah, the questions, every other slide was a question. And why don't you just, without apology, just give people a process to contact you should they like to explore what it's like for the Jayne Agency to join their team.
So are you asking just how to get in touch with us, or what does the process look like and how we engage people?
I think it's going to be so different for so many organizations. I just wanted to full-throatedly let everybody know that you should be engaging the Jayne Agency for one reason or another. I'm going to do it so I don't lose my marriage. I need to have alignment. My marriage is fine. I love you, Christy. But I'm not sure we want to get into price points and all the different product lines, but I'm sure you would welcome
absolutely
contact from anybody on this call to help them explore next right steps for their organization with your help.
And I'm going to turn that over to Veronica.
Will they be in the marketplace on that NANOE in the cloud?
Yes, they're enterprise members. They're going into downtown NANOE, and this video and handbook are going to go into impact videos.
Yes,
But
and
Veronica.
Yes, I'm going to put my email in chat again, so everybody has it, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions or to talk through next steps.
I am friends. I am, you know that when you meet like Dr. Robinson, how I am just glued to my chair and in awe of what she has been entrusted with. And I have that same experience every time I hear Brooke speak. And throughout the months, I get to work with Beth and Veronica and Abigail, who are on their team. And you should just know everything that you think you're experiencing here, it happens to be all true. And we're grateful. Thank you, Brooke. Thank you, team. Thank you, Jayne Agency. Job well done.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, everyone.